Are you looking to grow revenues, increase profitability, or obtain financing? If so, you came to the right place.
Running a business is all about leadership. How do you become a better leader? Learn from the successful entrepreneurs and business owners how to lead your organization more effectively. That's why we created Leadership Live at 8:05, Talking Small Business, to help you succeed with your host, Andrew Frazier, Business Growth Pro and CFO and founder of the Small Business Pro University. Every Tuesday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern, we're joined by experienced entrepreneurs and business owners who share their secrets to success via live stream. Also, every Friday morning, we release a new podcast episode. Either way, you will learn about developing your business leadership skills from our roster of highly performing guest experts. Leadership Live is one of the many valuable resources provided through the Small Business Pro University, empowering business owners to learn, profit, and grow. Find out more at sbprou.com.
Okay. All right. Good evening, everyone. How you doing? Welcome to Leadership Live at 8:05, Talking Small Business. Of course, I'm your host, Andrew Frazier. And tonight, as every night, what we focus on is two things. As a business owner, there's so many things you need to know that you can't possibly know them all. But that doesn't mean you can't be hurt by not knowing certain things. So the goal is to continually develop your business knowledge. And so one of the key components of Leadership Live is focusing on helping you to become a better business owner and be able to run your business better. But not only that, to grow, it takes leadership. Your business can only go as far as you're prepared to take it. So as a result, you have to continually develop your leadership skills and capabilities so that you can continue to move your business forward. So that's what Leadership Live is all about. Business knowledge and leadership development for entrepreneurs and business owners. So always appreciate everybody tuning in. Welcome to the show. Definitely, if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, as well as if you like things during the show, feel free to show us with a thumbs up or clap or whatever you can do there. So definitely, well, let's get ready to get started. So, one of the big things that a lot of business owners struggle with is how to price their products and services. What I've found is most business owners underprice what they offer. And as a result, they're not nearly as profitable as they could or should be. So tonight's show is very important because we're going to talk about business pricing, because there's a lot of ways to look at pricing. We have someone who has a lot of expertise in that. So looking forward to learning more about that. So tonight's guest, the topic is the price is right, or is it? Common pricing mistakes. And our guest is Etinosa, and I'm going to mess up your last name, so please forgive me. And actually, maybe I'll just say Etinosa A, and you can pronounce it for me. So let me invite Etinosa on the show. Hey, Etinosa, how are you doing tonight?
Hi, Andrew. Thank you for having me.
All right. Well, thank you for joining me tonight. Forgive me on your name, but how do you pronounce your last name?
My name is Etiosa, the N is silent, and last name is Agbonlahor.
Okay. Etinosa Agbonlahor. Okay. All right. Great. Well, thanks for joining tonight. As I mentioned, this is a really important topic for a lot of business owners. So look forward to chatting with you about that, as well as addressing people's comments and questions along the way. But before we do that, it would be good for the audience to know a little bit about who you are. So if you can take a few minutes to kind of talk a little bit about your journey and how you got to where you are, and then we'll take it from there. So sorry about that. And we'll take it from
Oh,
there.
oh, good. Yes. So I'm a behavioral economist, which means I study the psychology behind how people make financial decisions. I lead a team of behavioral economists who have been trained to do this and understand how do we interact with financial decisions? How do we buy? How do we save? How do we spend? How do we invest? And so you can imagine for a business owner, some of those learnings are very important when it comes to the concept of pricing. I've got a master's in behavioral economics from the University of Warwick in the UK, worked with a very big bank in Australia for many years, and then worked with an even bigger investment bank here in the US for many years, and worked with other companies in the financial domain, all centered around how do we help drive better financial well-being for people. That's meaning that everyday people, the average person, can exist in a day-to-day, can absorb income shocks. If they fall ill, if they're in an accident, they can absorb those shocks, and also they feel comfortable looking forward to the future because they can afford the future that they want to have. All of those things have been kind of the pinnacle or the kind of the crux of my career as a behavioral economist. And now I lead Decision Alpha, which is a pricing strategy and consumer research firm. And so what we do is really help business owners understand and unpack and really get to build more sustainable pricing in their businesses, bring in research, bring in our expertise. And all of that is working towards the aim of making sure that business owners get to build a sustainable business by exploring and making their pricing both stronger, more profitable, and easier for customers to understand. So that's been the journey so far.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, so you definitely looked at it from a large company side as well as a smaller company side in business, and you know, definitely seen a lot. So I think you'll be able to give us a lot of insight around around our topic tonight. So really looking forward to that. But before we do that, I'm just going to play a short video about the Small Business Pro University. This live stream is one of our brain trust initiatives, and one of the ways we help business owners achieve greater success faster and easier. Many small businesses experience low or no revenue growth, and the owners are not making enough money. I founded Small Business Pro University to help you break that cycle by empowering you with greater knowledge and enhanced skills to lead your organization more effectively. Over the past 15 years, I've collaborated with organizations like the Small Business Development Center, Rising Tide Capital, Empower the Village, NJMEP, Rutgers University, and SCORE to work one-on-one with over 1,000 business owners and teach tens of thousands of people about business. My experience includes serving as a naval officer, managing businesses, graduating from MIT, earning an MBA from NYU, and achieving the CFA designation, which has prepared me to accomplish my mission of helping 1,000,008 business owners to sell more, maximize profit, and finance growth by 2028. My vision is to create the ultimate business ecosystem for entrepreneurs. Small Business Pro University empowers entrepreneurs like you to run their businesses more professionally and create sustainable enterprises. We employ my proven proprietary Masterpreneur Playbook framework to guide your journey along the Masterpreneur path and facilitate your Masterpreneur evolution to work on your business and scale faster and easier. Small Business Pro University provides access to valuable resources, partnerships, and relationships that will help you to sell more, maximize profit, and finance growth. Our Masterpreneur initiatives include the Small Business Pro Network, 100+ expert-led multimedia courses, intensive training workshops, Spanish language training, Leadership Live at 8:05 live stream and podcast, in-person Power Breakfast events, and advisory coaching, consulting, and training services. Okay, welcome back. Tonight's topic: the price is right, or is it? Common pricing mistakes. So, before we get started, I just always like to ask guests, you know, so that we everybody starts on the same page. You know, what does pricing mean um, when you're thinking of it in terms of the business, and where do you start with determining what pricing should look like?
So I tell people to think about pricing as if you imagine that your business is a farm, right? So you've sown the seeds, you've planted, you've grown, you've done all the work to build a sustainable business. Pricing is what determines what kind of harvest you have, right? Pricing determines your harvest. And so that mindset of price is both the way that you, practically speaking, get to eat and feed your family. Your price matters a lot for your business, but then also your price is a signal to your customers about what kind of product are they buying, what kind of service are they buying, are you the right person to be working with when they come to do business with you, are they in the right room or not, right? So your price is both a signal and a way for you to capture value. We'll start there, as like that lays the foundation before we go deeper into how do you even think about the mechanics of pricing.
Okay, no, that's great. Definitely, business is all about providing value. So your pricing is a reflection of that. And also when you consider your business and how you want to position it, the pricing has an impact on the way people perceive your business. So that definitely, that's a great foundation for starting a conversation tonight. So now there are so many different pricing strategies out there that it's confusing, and you know and they're, probably for smaller businesses, there are probably a few likely pricing strategies that they should probably look to, at least initially. Could you share a couple of those and explain them?
Yes. So I think conceptually, it's if you're a small business owner, I want you to think about your pricing as a house, right? The entirety of your pricing comes together as a house. First of all, you have your cost floor. What is that? That is what does it take to turn and keep the lights on in your business? That's everything from insurance to your employee costs, everything it takes to keep the lights on in your business. That's your cost floor, right? If you cannot make your price equal to your cost floor, you're losing money, right? Cost flow. You also then have what I call your price ceiling, and that is what is the highest any customer in your business is willing to pay for your service or your product, right? So you've got the floor, you've got the ceiling. In between those, then the pillars holding this house up are what I call the alternatives, competitors, and then context. Alternatives and competitors is kind of self evident, right? What are people who sell the same thing you're selling? What are they charging for their work? Alternatives, however, is something that a lot of people don't think about because let's say you are an accountant, right? You think my competitor is all the accountants who are in the same city that I'm in. But your alternative could be somebody on ChatGPT plugging in, numbers and values and trying to figure out how to do their tax return themselves or trying to figure out their balance sheet at the end of the year by themselves, right? So you think about not just who are my competitors, you're also thinking about if a customer was not using my service, how would they get the job done instead, right? The entirety of the house comes together to help you understand what is the value I deliver and what are people willing to pay for it. So I don't want you to think about what is the right pricing model, etc. first. First of all, you want to try and understand what are my costs for, right? What does it take to keep the business lights on? What is the most any customer is willing to pay for this service, right? And then in between, what's the context in which I'm operating? All of that is going to give you the right kinds of information to then start to structure and figure out, well, how do I price this? And at Decision Alpha, we have a pricing framework that then guides you through how do you actually price your product, and we can go into that as well.
Okay, all right. Definitely great point about the price floor and the ceiling. I think that I find that a lot of business owners, um, one of their greatest fears is numbers and analysis. as a result, many times they don't really know what their cost is.
Mm.
Um, so that makes it difficult for the price floor. And I would also say generally they underestimate their cost and generally they underprice.
Mm.
And not sure if you run into that a lot, but kind of how would you approach a business owner sort of in that situation, and how what would be a good way to work with it?
Yeah, so we have, and we used to do this quite a bit when we first started. We had pricing strategy sessions, and they were really for small businesses. And we would have people come into the strategy session, and the first thing we would do would be walk through the costs and understand what does it look like to keep the lights on in your business. And as we would go through that process of understanding, insurance, employee costs, we would get to a place where people would start, you'd see the light bulb start to turn on, and you'd get people going, oh, wait, oh, I actually have this other cost. Oh, I didn't realize there's this cost as well. We worked with somebody who ran a research firm, and she realized that the way she had baked in her pricing was essentially leading to 30% of any of her gross margins, her gross revenue was going straight to paying the people who worked on a project with her. That's not always a good thing, right? It basically capped the amount of profit she could make regardless of whatever size of project she worked on. And so we start by combing through the costs pretty finely to understand not just what are the costs, but also how have you structured your costs to make sure that you're not making mistakes that could be affecting your revenue down the line. So for that business owner, it didn't matter whether she had a year where she had made 200,000 or a year where she had made 400,000. Her profit margins were basically the same, and her business felt stagnant because of the way she had structured some of her costs. It wasn't quite working the right way. So we had to help her fix that and go through the mindset of like, okay, this is not the right way to do it. Let me walk you through why, etc. So just understanding to start with your cost is a very, very important process because it helps you then understand what is the basis I'm working with, right? How do I make sure I'm not basically showing up to work and losing money, which is not something we want to do, right?
Yes, definitely don't want to show up to work and lose money, but surprisingly, there are a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners who are in that situation right now. One of the business owners I work with, they were looking to purchase the facility they were in, and they had a decent business, had good revenues, but finding that their profitability wasn't where it needed to be, and the big issue for them was they priced on an hourly basis,
Mm.
but they didn't capture the cost on an hourly basis. So
Mm.
sometimes if they did an hour of work, but two people were working on it, they would only bill 1 hour of work.
Mm.
And there wasn't enough markup on that hour because you got your marginal costs and you also have your fixed costs. Um, so definitely understanding your cost structure is very important.
Yeah.
Uh,
And I think just to break that down a little bit more, when you talk about like the variable cost, the fixed costs, right? Your fixed costs are things that always exist, right? Your insurance costs the same more or less every month, right? If you're paid on a monthly basis, whereas your variable costs in the instinct of that or in that instance of the business you just mentioned might look a little bit different, right? If they had 3 employees working on it versus if they had 2 employees. So as a business owner, if you're listening to this, you also want to Andrew's point, to make a distinction between what are the things that are fixed, meaning like I have to bear this cost regardless of what's going on, and then what are variable in the sense of when I sell a product, what is it going to actually cost me to deliver that service or that product.
Definitely, and each of those costs operate in a different way, like you mentioned, and your variable costs. A lot of times, people may price based on their variable costs. I always use an example about a can of soup. If you buy a can of soup for 50 cents and sell it for $1, you made 50 cents on that can of soup, but you really didn't, because you still had to pay a cashier, you still had to pay your rent, you still had other expenses that would keep you from breaking even. So, you have to incorporate the fixed expenses in, but also the fixed expenses are dependent on your volume. So it's a little bit of a moving target, I would say. So, um, so now, we're talking about pricing. You mentioned, that you've got alternative and you've got competitive pricing. Um, you know, Definitely, find large businesses can do things that small businesses can't do, but many times people see large businesses and what they do and assume that's what they should do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what are good things to take away from larger businesses as far as pricing, and what are bad things to take away from larger businesses as far as pricing?
Yeah, I think some good things to take away from larger businesses is being able to do pricing research. And it doesn't have to be a big, fancy piece of work if you're a small business. Even just um, talking to customers, understanding how do they value and how do they understand the service that you're providing to them. A lot of the mindset shift that the folks who work with us, clients, people who listen to us, who are tapped into our ecosystem, understand, and the mindset shift that they go through is moving from looking at just the cost and the markup as equating to their pricing, and moving towards understanding, well, what does my customer actually value this at? Right? There's a big difference if you are selling water in the middle of a rainstorm versus if you're selling water and everyone around you has just finished like a marathon and they're all thirsty. Like there's a difference between the value of the water at that time, right? So you're trying to understand, what is the value of my service to my client? What would they be willing to pay for it? And now I'm can back that up and create pricing based on what I know my clients actually will value my good or service or product at, right? So that's kind of like one of the things that you can take away from big companies is understanding and being willing to do that pricing research. We have a tool called Fred. It's like an interactive pricing guide. Folks can go into it and kind of test their pricing with that. It's free, or you can pay whatever you want with it. It's fred.decisionalpha.co. But that's one easy way for you to actually start to do some of this pricing research and stress test your own pricing. But on the other side, on the flip side, bad things that people might take away from big companies is assuming that competitor research and just copying your competitors is the way to set pricing. In fact, I've told a story before of being at a venture capital event, and it's all founders and investors all chatting with each other. And I was talking to somebody about this platform that they had built, something to do with like operations and logistics. And I asked, well, how are you thinking about pricing this product? It sounds really interesting. How are you going to price the platform? And the person who was speaking to me kind of leans in and lowers her voice conspiratorially and says that she's thinking about pricing it by undercutting her competitors, just to kind of grab market share. And for whatever reason, we have inherited this idea from big companies that the way you grab market share is to reduce prices, and that it's a good thing to grab market share at all costs. You're a small business. You cannot afford to play the same game that Amazon is playing when it's, doing the loss leader thing. What I mean by that is a company that is well funded and has revenue, has lots of money coming from all of the different experts that it's doing, can afford to look at a product and go, we'll make it super cheap so we have everyone come buy from us, and then we'll slowly increase the price back up to what we want it to be. When you're a business and you're running a smaller business, it's way riskier to do that because you might make your product super cheap and not enough people come to buy it. You might make it super cheap and you might then start a price war because then your competitors make it cheap and now you're stuck in this weird place, right? And people think price wars are a myth, but if you own any mutual funds in your portfolio, if you're somebody who invests, a lot of your mutual funds from the big brokerages in America cost you no money. That didn't used to be the case. That's the result of a price war that they price themselves down to zero. They make no money on that, really. They make money in other ways, but mutual funds did not used to be free. It was the result of a price war. So all of that to say, good things that you can take away from the bigger companies: do pricing research. There's lots of ways to do that. We have apps, playbooks, things that you can use if you're interested in that. Happy to talk to that more. Bad things that you can take from big companies is thinking that just because you know what your competitor is doing and you based on what your competitor is doing, you've done the right pricing research and your prices are right.
No, great points. I mean, definitely always um, tell people that as a small business, you shouldn't be the lowest cost like priced competitor because you have the highest costs. So then your margins are very much squeezed, or you're losing money, and you
Mm,
can't do that for the long term. And like you mentioned before, your price can also determine how people perceive your brand.
yeah, yeah,
And,
yeah.
if you price too low, people assume that your brand isn't quality.
Yep.
So,
We,
so very important.
yeah,
So
and I think to that point, there's something we call the tyranny of low prices. By we, I mean me. That's what I call it. But there's something about pricing too low that then, to your point, makes people question the value of what it is that you're offering them. Right? It makes them question why is this price, right? There's been some studies that have been done where they gave people who were experiencing, like, they had, they gave people aspirin, and the only information folks had about the aspirin was whether it cost, like, did it cost $1 or 30 cents or 50 cents for the aspirin pill. And they found that people who had the more expensive aspirin reported having lower rates of a headache. Basically, they reported feeling less pain compared to folks who got the cheaper aspirin. Now, of course, in the study, it was all a placebo. It was just sugar pills. Nobody was actually taking aspirin. They didn't know that. But just the price alone was a signal to them that actually physically impacted how they felt as a result, right? And this has been replicated across wine, across different domains. Your price is a signal, and if you're too low, you can actually price yourself out of being considered by the customers.
okay, no, that's a great point. Um, so now, you know, you mentioned how big competitors may come in as sort of a loss leader. I think Walmart and Home Depot kind of do that, come in and clear out the competition with super low prices and then just go back up to low prices and be more profitable. Um, so, you know, so you talked about a little bit about, how a small business should think about their pricing first. Um, what are the three most popular pricing strategies or best pricing strategies for small business owners to start with in terms of when they're considering their pricing decisions?
Yeah, I think that's tricky because I think you have to understand who is your customer, what are they willing to pay for your service, right? So how we do our pricing, how we set up a pricing strategy at Decision Alpha is that we walk through our pricing framework. It's got 4 steps. The first thing that you want to do is what we call mapping monetization zones, which is basically you looking at your product or your service and understanding what are the different types of customers who work with me, right? So we've worked with, for example, an RIA, like a financial planner, and the types of people who worked with that financial planner were people who wanted a financial plan, just a one-off financial plan, but they felt comfortable managing their own money. But then there were also people who said, "I want you to manage the money. I never want to touch it. You just do it and like tell me what's going on," right? So let's assume that those are two different types of people. At the core of it, she's still selling financial planning, but now she has two different segments that she can consider. Folks who want on hand, hands on kind of help, and folks who are like, it's a one off, give me a plan, I'm good to go, right? Same service, just being presented in different ways. And so the first thing you want to do is basically you want to map monetization zones and understand how are different customers interacting with my product or service. Now that you know the different types of customers you have, you move that into willingness to pay research. And that sounds big and complex. It can be, but really what you're doing is that you're talking to customers and prospects to understand what are you willing to pay for this service? What do you value it at? If you weren't using this, well, what else would you be using? How do you solve the problem I help you solve? If you are a cleaner, how do you keep your house clean? What does it cost to keep your house clean? If you're a bookkeeper, how much time are you spending doing your books right now, right? How much are you investing in doing your books? What does that look like, right? You're trying to understand how do people value you and what would they be willing to pay for your service. You then can take all of that into testing up your pricing strategy. And that can look anything from, okay, we're always going to show people 2 or 3 options. We're going to have a subscription model. We are going to have, um, uh, pay whatever you pay what you want model, right? That's where you can kind of go into and play around with the strategy. But you're doing that from a firm understanding of what people are willing to pay for your service first before you then even go into how do we show this to people? How do we frame it so that people are more likely to buy and choose the package that we want them to buy? And then finally, the fourth step is to constantly test and iterate. We always say that pricing should be a feature, not a reaction. And what that means is that you don't just set your prices once and walk away. I think a lot of small businesses do that. But if you look at big businesses, like Anthropic changed its price 3 times last year, right? We've seen other companies like Lovable change it over and over and over again. They're always experimenting to try and find what is the right price. Well, how do we make sure we're at a place that makes sense for our customers and for our business? So it's okay to continue to test until you feel like you've found the right kind of level for what you are and for the value that you deliver. And then you expect that as you deliver more value, as your company grows, that price will grow and evolve with you as well. So you want to go through that kind of those 4 steps. We have the 4 steps kind of documented in our pricing playbook. It's free. You can find that. I'm sure it'll be in the show notes for this. But you want to go through those 4 steps to really help you understand. I don't just want to pick a strategy and lean into it. I want to understand, how do my customers see me? How do they value me? And then I can go into how do I set up my price as a result.
Okay, definitely great stuff. Great stuff. Um, so now, you've got, you know, value-based pricing as a strategy some people use. Cost-based pricing is another competitor-based pricing. Um, and I guess each company is unique, and each industry is unique, and may drive what the pricing model is. Um, but I think that pricing is an important part of your marketing plan, your marketing strategy, and your market research. So given that, you really want to think through what you're pricing and how you're pricing. Um, so, can you tie pricing back a little bit more to marketing strategy and sort of how they influence each other?
Yes, absolutely. So let me give an example. Let me give an anecdote. INSEAD is a business school in France, and I promise this is going somewhere. They did a piece of research a couple of years ago where they had people hooked up to fMRI machines and they had them taste different bottles of wine while they're in this fMRI machine that's like measuring brain activity. And the only thing that people could tell about the bottles of wine, it's all identical bottles of wine. The only thing that they could tell about them was the price on the bottles, right? And what they found was that when people felt like they were drinking a more expensive bottle of wine, the medial orbital frontal cortex actually showed more brain activity, meaning they were actually having a more viscerally different experience to when they were drinking a cheaper bottle of wine. Now, naturally, it's all the same wine, but the brain activity was completely different when they were drinking the cheap versus the expensive wine. What that shows is that as business owners, we often think that people have an intuitive understanding of the value of our services, of our products, or our products, right? In reality, it's the other way around. People are going to look at your price and they're going to deduce from your price the value of your product or your service. Now, what that means from a marketing perspective is you have to think about, how do I position myself to make sure that it aligns with who I want people to compare me with, right? As human beings, we don't make decisions in a vacuum. We're always trying to compare something to something else in order to make a choice, right? You don't just go, I want this one. You think about, do I want this or that? You're always trying to find a comparison point. We make decisions relative to some sort of reference point. And so marketing is about establishing that reference point. It's about you going, what do I want people to compare my good, my service, my product to as a reference point? And so you can choose to be a product that is more, or a service that is more, we are utilitarian, we compete on being the cheapest brand, and that's how we do our work, right? You could also choose to be, hey, we're differentiated. For example, I had tax reps come to me a while ago and they said, hey, we only work with folks who invest in real estate. And we know you invest in real estate because we're at a real estate conference. So we work with people like you. This is the kind of thing that we offer them. This is why you should consider working with us. And they got me. I did temporarily move over to them and try and work with them because they said, hey, we only work with people like you specifically, right? So thinking about how do you differentiate, how do you make sure how do you set yourself up in a way that people are comparing you to people who you actually want to be compared to? Your price is going to be one of the things that they use to determine, do I want to work with you or not? And it's not just about, are you the cheapest? It's really about, who else like you would I use if I wasn't using you?
Okay, great point. That takes us back to um, creating a niche. Really, who is your real target market? And, as a smaller business, you should have a smaller target market. Larger businesses can have much larger target market because they have a much larger marketing budget and they have more brand awareness. Um, but you talked about differentiation, and you really got to differentiate yourself to the niche. That's how you differentiate. And even the people that did the accounting for real estate, they can charge more than just a firm that does accounting.
Yep.
So, and maybe if you want to talk a little bit about the niche thing and differentiation a little bit more, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, I think that there's a couple of ways to differentiate and to niche down. Um, of course, one of those ways is by saying I only work with people like this, right? I've got friends who run they're CFOs, but they only work with physical therapists. So they have physical therapy background, so they built their whole CFO business on, we only work with physical therapists. And so they're a great niche because they can say, we know what your cost structure looks like, we know what your financials look like because we've been there, right? So they can speak to that. It helps them differentiate. Other ways of differentiating yourself can also be actually in how you set up your pricing. If everybody else in your market is doing subscriptions, or everyone else in your market is billed hourly, you might come in and say, I do a flat rate. It's one flat fee, but it's every month I charge you. And that's what it looks like to work with me, right? So there's different ways to consider how do we differentiate. The other way to think about differentiation is actually in what you offer, right? So if you say I'm a bookkeeper or for bookkeeping services, you're able to then think about, when somebody works with me as a client, what are they actually trying to solve for, right? What is the need that they are trying to fulfill? I know how I help them as a bookkeeper, but what else could I be doing? What other needs do they have that are remain unsolved once I'm done working with them? Can I extend to that? Can I partner with somebody and offer that as a package, right? So you can think about differentiation in terms of what you actually offer, how you set up your pricing to separate yourself from the rest of your market, and then who you focus on as a niche. And the great thing about differentiation is that if you do it really well, it can help you build excellent retention. So in that tax example, I told you I did switch to the real estate focused tax people. And I very quickly realized that, oh, my taxes are way more complicated than just real estate because I've got income from I've worked around the world. So I've got income from different parts of the world. I've all sorts of things going on. And there are people who were who just had more expertise than the real estate. And so I had to go back to the people who I was using originally, who actually do have that expertise, but never really bragged about it. I never said, hey, other people don't know how to do what we do when it comes to foreign income tax. it's a very specialized skill set. You need us, right? So I actually have to go back to them and say, hey, please take me back, help me figure out my taxes. And I've stuck with them for many years now. So if you differentiate well and you can deliver on that differentiation, it can also be an effective retention strategy. People will stay with you for a very long time.
So definitely. Um, so now, it's fine. A lot of small business owners feel like anybody could buy their product. So they think about pricing so that anybody could buy their product. And, is that something you run into a lot? And, how do you kind of work through them on that?
Yes. So I tell my clients that it's easier to sell to somebody who has already bought from you the first time. And so we always, when I work with people on pricing strategy, we're thinking about how do we make sure that the clients who have bought with you once become repeat clients? How do we build new packages? How do we build onboarding ramps and things like that to make sure that you sell to somebody one time, but then they buy from you more than once, right? So we put that to the side. When it comes to thinking through how do we help customers or how do we help clients kind of build that differentiation? How do we help clients kind of understand and set themselves up for success in that way? I think that it really comes down to just understanding and niching down, as we've talked about, niching down, differentiation, kind of setting yourself up to be different. But when clients come to us and think through, I want to make sure that we have customers who are coming back over and over again. For example, we worked with a lawyer who had come in and said, a lot of my clients come in, we do one-off issues with them, but because I never see the same type of person over and over again, like it's always somebody with a slightly different issue, slightly different matter, I feel like my pricing is all over the place. I can't price and I can't kind of charge consistently because everyone comes in with something different. How do I fix this? How do I actually deliver pricing that is consistent so I can then know if I have 5 types of clients this month, this is how much money I'm going to make with my business, which means I can hire these sorts of people. And so what we did with her was really kind of step back and understand fundamentally, what are you delivering, right? Yes, they're all coming to you with slightly different matters, but is the way you're solving the problem kind of similar? How much effort does it take at a base rate for you to solve the problem for them? Kind of walking through all of that with her and then going, okay, these are basically these kinds of people roughly who are coming to you. You can categorize, you can segment them so that when a customer comes, you can go, they fit into that segment. This is what I'm going to charge. This is the expected return on value for if I charge this way. And if they go above, if it requires more effort, more hours, etc., I have contingency plans built into that. So that's kind of one of the ways that we worked with somebody to just basically understand and move from I'm confused, I'm not quite sure how to charge, what to charge to, we've got a systematic way to think about and start to charge.
All right. No, definitely. And you also sort of tied it back a little bit to cost because he had to understand sort of what each category would cost, which they may not have considered before. So very important. So now you mentioned that it's important to have customer centric solutions. Um, Many times people think in terms of features that they offer to people, but it's more important to think about the benefits that you offer to your customers because the benefits can be way more valuable than the cost. You think of prescription drugs, it might cost them like 1 cent to do a pill, but they might charge you $5 for it, which seems like highway robbery, and it kind of is, but the value's still there because people still buy them. So, how can people be more customer centric and better understand how to add more value for their customers without cost?
Yes, I think this is one of the great areas where being a small business owner actually gives you an advantage over bigger businesses, because it's easier for you to talk to your customers. You don't have to set up a big dramatic study to talk to your customers. You can just pick up the phone and have a conversation with them. Right, you're a small business, you have that flexibility. In fact, it's better for them to hear from you than for them to not hear from you, right? And so when you think about customer centric solutions, it's really just having those casual chats with customers that are kind of in the buying process. Hey, why did you choose us? How did you hear about us? That's something everybody asks, but what problem are you trying to solve today? What have everybody used to solve the problem to date? How would you solve it if you weren't buying from us? How are you going to use this when you get home? If you weren't using us, what else would you be using? Right? Those kinds of little questions here and there, helping you actually gather information to then understand, oh, this is how I can enhance my value. Oh, I do financial research for clients, but actually what they would love is for me to help them solve retention issues, right? So you want to talk to customers constantly, consistently. You should like your customers, right? You should like them. They should like you. They should like you as well. So makes it easy to have these kinds of conversations where you're collecting ideas and you're collecting information to then help you go, this is what else I can deliver. This is where else I can help. This is where else I can add value. And sometimes the reason that you don't want to compete on cost, for example, there was a tire manufacturer. And if you think about manufacturing, it's kind of one of those industries where everyone knows what the pricing is set up at. And one of the ways that they differentiated themselves was actually by being able to introduce a level of ease into the process. They thought about, well, all of our clients are trucking companies and they're buying these tires because they need to be on the road and need to cover all these miles and do all of these deliveries. What if we offered a service where we would bring the tire to the customer and install it? And if a tire ever went out, we would bring another one right away, right? And so they could differentiate themselves by thinking, what else does our client need? Oh, they need ease, they need lack of friction, they need these tires delivered very quickly. We can do that. Why don't we do that, right? And so they could add that as a service charge to the tires that we're already selling because they knew that was something their clients were willing to pay for. So you being able to be in touch with your customers and your clients more than a big company would becomes a strategic advantage to help you think about how else can I deliver value outside of just being cheap or competing on cost.
No, great point. One of the things about being a small business and advantages is, it's a lot easier to like a person than to like a logo. So, by actually doing the outreach and being a person to them, it's amazing how beneficial that is, and that's a key way that you can differentiate yourself. So now, we've covered a whole bunch of stuff, and have a couple questions from the audience. So I just want to make sure we cover them. So this first one is, at what point does being generous start being harmful to your business?
That's an interesting question. I think that when you think about generosity, it means that you're given from overflow, right? I'm generous because I have enough that I can give and I can have an impact on people. But generosity also doesn't mean necessarily that it's financial generosity. It could be I'm generous because I give people my time. If you think about the society that we live in today, everyone is on their phones and yet we're also lonely, right? There's a loneliness epidemic. The Surgeon General declared that in 2020, even before the pandemic, right? So giving people the time, if you're somebody who runs a shop, making eye contact with them, how was your day? How are you going? Listening to them, hearing them, that's an act of generosity. It doesn't have to be that you set your prices super cheap to help them, right? It can be I'm listening, I'm making contact. It can be I remember the clients who come in who are maybe a little bit elderly or mobility impaired, and so I make sure that we can do deliveries to them at their apartments or in their homes instead of making them come down. I remember their orders. A form of generosity is even just remembering people when they walk into your store. How are you? How's your daughter doing? Right? So expand your definition of generosity, not just to be I'm giving money or I'm being cheap or I'm finding ways to be financially generous. Think about generosity as a broader, how can I as a human being be available to the other human beings around me and make an impact in that way?
Excellent. So yeah, so there's a lot of other ways to be generous and add value. And one of the things I say to a lot of people is don't lower your price. Possibly add more to what you're offering, so that you can maintain your price, and that's sort of the type of generosity that you're talking about. So now also, um, this is a good question from the audience as well. How can a business owner tell whether the customer genuinely sees enough value to support a higher price?
Two ways. The first one is to do what we call willingness to pay research. And so, for example, we worked with a big nonprofit platform that was building a new, they were building a software to help the other nonprofits like them with donor registration and just keeping track of donors and people who are volunteering with them. And so they wanted to understand, hey, we've never built anything like this. There's nothing like this on the market. What do people, how do people value it? What are they willing to pay for it? And so we ran willingness to pay studies for them. And what we did was basically sit down with their prospects and ask questions like, for this problem that this tool is going to help you solve, what are you currently doing to solve it? For the way the tool is going to solve the issue for you, what would be too cheap? What would be too expensive? What would be, it's kind of expensive, but you still think about it as like, I'd be willing to pay that. And what would you consider a bargain, right? We want to get a range of prices that then helped us back out and understand, okay, this is what people are willing to pay for it. But what was interesting in that study was not just that we got this is what people are willing to pay for it. We found out through that study that prospects who were more mature, who were bigger companies, actually had a better understanding of the product and had a better understanding of how they would use the product in their ecosystem. And so they knew the kind of impact the product could have. And so they were willing to pay way more for it because they were ready for a product like that. They had been looking for something like that. Whereas companies and prospects that were smaller didn't quite get the value and they didn't really understand it. And so we could say to them, hey, in your marketing, you want to just focus on the clients who are actually big enough to understand and be able to use your platform because they understand the value and you can get a higher price from them. So to answer your question, to tell whether customers genuinely see enough value to support a higher price, one of the ways you can do that is to do that willingness to pay research and just ask, what's too high, what's too low, what would you be willing to pay for it? And you might get some surprising insights from that. The other thing you might do is more in real time as new prospects come to you, put the higher price in front of them and see who says yes, see who says no. You might put it in front of 10 new prospects, and out of 10, see how many people accepted, how many people kind of thought about it before they accepted, and how many people flat out rejected it. And that will give you some signal as well.
No, great point. And also it's good to think about increasing your pricing on your current clients. I know at one point, I increased my pricing by 25% and nobody said anything. They're like, fine. So that was good and bad because then I was like, I should have been charging that much before. But, but some businesses increase pricing every year. And how should people think about price increases in terms of every business is different, any industry is different, but if there's some rules of thumb for certain characteristics?
Yep. There are some rules of thumb that you can consider, but I'm also going to give you some new ones to the rules of thumb. If you haven't raised your prices in 18 months, you probably are overdue for a price increase, partly because inflation has risen so much. So you're probably losing money. Your margins are probably slightly lower than they would be otherwise if we weren't having such an interesting rate of inflation these days. So if you haven't raised it in 18 months, think about relooking at your pricing, number one. Another rule of thumb that people use, and I'll talk about how I feel about this one, is if you put your pricing in front of lots of people and they all say yes and they're always buying from you and you never have anyone complain about the price, maybe your price is too low and there's room to move it up. The thing though is that there's new ones. If you're a new business, if you're a smaller business, sometimes it's better to be bringing in money, right, than to be having people say no. So it really depends on, do you have enough kind of reserves to absorb some of the people who are going to say no to you? Are you set up, is your business mature enough for that? If it is, then yes, you can start to increase your price and have those conversations. And this sort of decision is something that the pricing guide I mentioned, fred.decisionalpha.co, is really good at helping you think through, am I in a good place to raise my prices or should I wait? Right. So you can check it out and it can help you make those decisions. The other thing I want to talk about with price raising is you also have to think about who's your customer. To Andrew's point, who's your customer? What are they looking for from you? How do they interact with you? And how are they going to perceive your price increase? There's a way to announce a price increase that's going to make people go, sure. Like Andrew's clients, right? Sure, whatever, I'll pay it. Right? There's ways to announce a price increase that's going to make people flip the table and want to walk away. So you want to think about the nuance and how you actually do it there. And finally, the ethics of all of this, right? You can do it, should you do it? Those are also some things to consider. For example, I have a real estate portfolio. I have tenants who I haven't raised the rent on in 3 years. Not because I don't think it's healthy to raise prices every year. I do think it's a healthy thing to do, but I also think about it's a hard economy for a lot of people. Let's keep things the way they are for now. And in the long term, I would rather have the same tenant stay in the house for a very long period of time. It helps my gross margins versus having to do turnovers every year because I increased the rent and then they moved out too early or too quickly. So just think about the long-term versus short-term perspectives and the ethics of the thing, as well as if you are then in a place where you should raise your prices, how do you do it and how do you communicate it to clients in a way that's going to allow them to accept and understand why you're doing it?
No, that's great. Excellent. So thanks for answering those. The one thing I don't like about the show is, and ours just not enough time to talk to great people like you. You've shared so much valuable knowledge and information that we could go on for hours and hours because obviously you're excited about what you do. You know a lot about it, but our audience is going to be able to stay and hang out that long. So before we go, I always ask guests to share 3 key takeaways because many times people can't remember more than 3 things. So we want to make sure people have 3 good takeaways in terms of what we talked about and what they can start thinking about putting together and utilizing going forward. So I'm going to play a short video, and then after the video, if you can share your takeaways, that would be great. Hi, Andrew here, and I'm excited to announce the launch of our new book, 99 Proven Tips to Accelerate Your Masterpreneur Journey. 5 years, 33 incredible guests, hundreds of powerful business lessons, and now it's all in one place. Introducing 99 Proven Tips to Accelerate Your Masterpreneur Journey, a brand new book built from the insights, wisdom, and strategies shared by the guest experts of our podcast, Leadership Live at 8:05, Talking Small Business. Inside, you'll discover actionable tips on how to launch smarter.
So if you have an idea that you have researched and you know who your customer is and you think that you've got the experience you need, now is a perfect time to start a business. But remember, start as a side hustle first.
Grow faster.
So sales is about problem solving, not about manipulating. You have to understand the math of your business, the sales math.
Lead more effectively.
You shouldn't expect someone to be you. You have to understand and create processes to basically train people on how to handle certain situations and basically set people on the right path, right? So they can become successful within your organization.
And scale your business with confidence.
Bet on yourself and not be afraid to take risks and to know that you have within you the ability to accomplish your dreams and accomplish your goals.
Think like an entrepreneur. Now, I know there may be many entrepreneurs listening, but there may be some who aren't entrepreneurs. It's all well and good. I'm here to say entrepreneurship is not just something you do, it's a way that you think. And the characteristics of an entrepreneur's thinking are creativity, resourcefulness, courage, resilience, and passion.
This isn't theory, it's practical advice straight from entrepreneurs and thought leaders who have done it. 5 years of conversations, 33 voices of experience, and now 99 tips to accelerate your masterpreneur journey. Get your copy today. Pre-order now to reserve your signed copy. Click the button below or scan the QR code to order from www.sbprou.com/99-tips. All right, great. So, like I said, we covered a lot tonight. What are the 3 key takeaways that you want people to have from our discussion today?
Yes. So first one is talk to your customers. It's very important to understand how they value you, how they're thinking about your value, your good, your service, etc. You're a small business. It should be easy to have those conversations. If you need help figuring out what questions to ask them when it comes to pricing, our pricing playbook is free. It's at playbook.decisionalpha.co. You can download that. It will have some scripts you can use. The second thing is to really think about if you feel like you are earning the same amount every year, your margins really haven't changed, or you're struggling and you're kind of constantly struggling with your revenue or your margins, it's important to think about how do I differentiate myself enough that I can charge at a different rate from other people. And as I've said, there's lots of different ways to differentiate yourself, but differentiation is very important because it's what not only then allows you to set a higher standard for your pricing, but then it's what keeps people coming back to you and working with you because they identify with you in some ways. So think about how do I differentiate my business? Super important. And then the third thing is if you're thinking and working through, do I want to raise my prices? Is it time? I don't know. She said 18 months. Is it 18 months? I don't. If you're working through that in your mind, Fred.decisionalpha.co can help you kind of figure that out. It's pay whatever you want, but it's a really good tool for you to kind of interactively ask it questions, get some insights back to help you figure out, is this a good time to change anything about my pricing? And if I do want to change anything about my pricing, what should I start with, right? It breaks it down into like a systematic, do this first, then that, then the other thing over a couple of weeks for you. So you're not inundated with where do I even start from? So those 3 things should help you get started with understanding what do I do to get better pricing for my business.
Excellent. Well, definitely, as a small business owner, you can talk to your customers a lot easier and more in depth than larger companies. So take advantage of that. That helps all the way around. Of course, you don't want to be cookie cutter. You got to just differentiate yourself and have a value proposition. Why should someone buy from you versus somebody else? And finally, if you're making that decision and how to implement that decision, you don't have to do it by yourself. There's other people, there's other tools that can help you do that more effectively. So, I think definitely, this has been really powerful knowledge and information. We've gotten some great comments and questions from the audience. So obviously they are, they feel that they've gotten good value out of the session. And, that's our goal to, keep people coming back because, at the end of the day, differentiating what you do, that's the same thing, we have to do here at Small Business Pro University, and you have to do with your company. So, definitely, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule. We're going to add some of the links to the comments on, our posts on social media and other things. So that's great. So thanks again for joining us. If you can hang out for a few minutes, and let me just close everything out. So definitely, once again, always appreciate everybody tuning in, all your questions, all your comments. That's really one of the things that helps make the show great. We had an outstanding guest tonight. I'm sure you learned something. I learned some things as well, and that we can put to work to be more successful in our businesses. And that's really what it's all about. So thanks again, once again tonight for tuning in. As you know, each week we have a great guest and a great topic. So I hope you can join us next week as well. And always remember, at the end of the day, the more that you know, the faster and more successfully your business is going to grow.
Thank you for listening to Leadership Live at 8:05, Talking Small Business. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and to the podcast on your favorite podcast platform. Leadership Live is one of the many valuable resources provided through the Small Business Pro University, empowering business owners to learn, profit, and grow. Find out more at sbpro.com. Thank you for listening to Leadership Live at 8:05, Talking Small Business. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and to the podcast on your favorite podcast platform. Leadership Live is one of the many valuable resources provided through the Small Business Pro University, empowering business owners to learn, profit, and grow. Find out more at sbpro.com.